They laughed when she was evicted from her home. They didn't know her inheritance was the bank itself. The grand boardroom of Hawthorne Financial hummed with a tension as thick as the mahogany table that dominated its center. Polished to a mirror sheen, it reflected the anxious faces of the company's most senior executives, all meticulously dressed, their expressions a carefully calibrated mix of apprehension and practiced neutrality. Their eyes, darting with nervous energy, repeatedly flickered towards the imposing double doors at the far end of the room, as if expecting a phantom to materialize. Lysander Thorne, the youthful chief operating officer, a man whose ambition was as sharp and unyielding as the crease in his custom-tailored suits, adjusted the knot of his silk tie, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. Beside him, Coraline Vesper, his equally calculating fiancé and the firm's public relations director, checked her reflection in a compact, her gaze flickering with a cruel anticipation that was barely contained beneath a veneer of elegant composure. They sat at the head of the table, an unspoken claim to dominion hanging heavy in the opulent air, a silent challenge to the empty seat at the far end. "This charade has gone on long enough," Lysander declared, his voice cutting through the subdued murmurs of the room like a sharp blade. He addressed the assembled executives, though his eyes lingered pointedly on that empty chair, a chair once exclusively reserved for the enigmatic founder, Sylvia Hawthorne. "It's time we put an end to this eccentricity. The old woman has made her bed. And now, she must lie in it, or rather, on the street." Coraline let out a delicate, mocking titter, a sound that, to an unseen observer, grated on the nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. Her small, cruel laugh seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their expensive chairs, a collective ripple of unease moving through the room. They knew the rumors, of course. The whispers about Sylvia Hawthorne's supposed decline had grown louder, more insistent, over the past few months. The recent eviction from a humble, forgotten apartment in a less than desirable part of the city had been widely circulated, an almost salacious detail savored by those who found her formidable presence an impediment. A collective sigh of relief, barely perceptible, rippled through the room. Finally, the erratic, demanding, and utterly uncompromising presence of the founder would be gone. Lysander and Coraline had skillfully cultivated this narrative, painting Sylvia as a senile, burdensome relic, ripe for replacement, a figure whose time had long passed. They had even arranged for a small, carefully worded press release, framed as a humanitarian gesture by the bank, regarding the sad but necessary foreclosure of a property belonging to a former associate. The irony was so profound, so utterly delicious in its layered deception, that an unseen narrator could almost taste its bitter tang. Their triumph was almost palpable, a thick, cloying scent of victory in the air. A sudden, sharp rap echoed through the room, making several executives jump, their nerves frayed by the charged atmosphere. The grand double doors swung open, not with the usual gentle push, but with an assertive, almost violent force that bespoke a singular will. Standing framed in the doorway was a figure that commanded instant silence, a presence so absolute it seemed to absorb all sound, all light. It was Sylvia Hawthorne. But this was not the Sylvia they had evicted. Not the frail, bewildered old woman they had publicly ridiculed, whose supposed decline they had so gleefully exploited. This Sylvia was a force of nature, radiating an almost palpable power that seemed to hum in the air around her. She was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored power suit of deep sapphire blue, its fabric shimmering with authority in the subdued lighting of the hall. Her silver hair, once meticulously disheveled for her role, was now styled in a severe, elegant bun, revealing a face unmarred by the feigned fragility she had adopted. Her eyes, once seemingly clouded by age and confusion, now sparkled with an unnerving clarity, sharp and unyielding as diamonds, piercing through the very souls of those who dared to meet her gaze. Beside her stood a formidable man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, holding a large, embossed leather briefcase with quiet authority. An attorney, no doubt, and one whose reputation preceded him. A collective gasp went around the table, a sudden, sharp intake of breath that filled the void of silence. Lysander's triumphant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of bewildered horror, as if he had witnessed a specter from his darkest nightmares. Coraline's compact, still clutched in her trembling fingers, slipped from her grasp, clattering loudly on the polished mahogany table, the sound shockingly loud in the sudden quiet. Their faces, moments ago alight with malicious triumph and smug satisfaction, now contorted in confusion, then dawning dread, a visceral understanding of something deeply, terribly wrong. The game, as Sylvia knew with a chilling certainty, was indeed over. And they had no idea they were the ones who had lost. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the curtain was about to be drawn back on a truth far more devastating than any of them could have imagined. To truly understand the piercing clarity in Sylvia Hawthorne's eyes that fateful morning, one had to delve into the labyrinthine corridors of her past, a journey that led from the humblest beginnings to the pinnacle of financial power. She had been born into a family of modest means, learning early the value of hard work and unwavering integrity. Her intellect, sharp and incisive, had been her greatest asset, propelling her through scholarships and grueling hours of study. She had built Hawthorne Financial from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick, through sheer grit, unparalleled intellectual prowess, and an unwavering, almost evangelical, commitment to integrity. In an industry often tainted by avarice and cutthroat ambition, Sylvia had prided herself on fostering a culture of trust, prudence, and genuine client care. For decades, her name was synonymous with unwavering reliability, a beacon of stability in the often turbulent seas of global finance. She had forged an empire, not merely for personal gain or the accumulation of wealth, but with a profound, almost spiritual, belief in its potential to do good, to genuinely serve its clients and the broader community. The bank was her life's work, a testament to her vision. However, as the years turned into decades, and as she, with a growing sense of weariness, began to delegate more responsibility to the younger generation, a subtle, insidious rot began to set in. The new guard, particularly her grandnephew Lysander Thorne, seemed to view the institution not as a legacy of service to be nurtured, but as a personal piggy bank, a means to an end for their own increasingly lavish lifestyles and endless self-aggrandizement. Lysander, a sharp but utterly unprincipled young man, had risen rapidly through the ranks, not through genuine merit or hard-earned expertise, but through a cunning blend of flattery directed upwards and ruthless internal politicking downwards. He was the embodiment of everything Sylvia had strived to avoid, a man who saw only profit where she saw people, who valued appearances over integrity, and who believed that rules were merely suggestions for lesser mortals, easily bent or broken for personal gain. His ambition was a cold, hungry thing, untempered by ethics or empathy. His fiancée, Coraline Vesper, was an equally disturbing addition to the corporate landscape. As the firm's public relations director, she wielded words like weapons, capable of spinning any narrative to suit their agenda, regardless of the inconvenient truth. Her dazzling smile, a carefully constructed facade, hid a heart as cold and calculating as a winter's night. Sylvia had observed, with growing dismay, Coraline's almost pathological obsession with social media appearances, extravagant galas, and the cultivation of a shallow, materialistic image for the firm, rather than focusing on its core values of service and trust. Coraline's primary concern was always the optics, the superficial gleam, never the substance. They were a perfect, albeit terrifying, match, Lysander, the ruthless operator, and Coraline, the master illusionist, weaving a web of deceit around the very foundations Sylvia had built. The true turning point for Sylvia had not been a single, dramatic betrayal that could be pinpointed to a specific date, but rather a slow, agonizing erosion of trust, a corrosive process that unfolded over years. It was a series of minor indignities, subtle power grabs, and increasingly blatant displays of disrespect that accumulated like dust motes in a forgotten attic, eventually suffocating the very air of integrity. She saw them pushing through questionable investment schemes that promised exorbitant, unrealistic returns while carrying hidden, dangerous risks, prioritizing short-term gains over long-term stability and client welfare. Most gallingly, she witnessed them openly disrespecting the long-standing, loyal employees who had built the company alongside her, the very backbone of Hawthorne Financial. Lysander would dismiss veteran analysts as dinosaurs, their decades of experience and wisdom rendered obsolete in his superficial worldview. Coraline would scoff at the firm's modest, yet genuinely effective, philanthropic initiatives as bad branding, preferring splashy, high-profile events that garnered media attention rather than truly helping those in need. Worst of all was their treatment of Sylvia herself. As she aged, they subtly, then overtly, began to undermine her authority, like termites gnawing at the foundations of a grand house. They spread whispers about her fading memory, her increasingly erratic decisions, and her urgent need for a peaceful retirement, all calculated to erode her influence and isolate her. They excluded her from key meetings, minimized her contributions in front of other executives, and treated her, to her face, with a patronizing condescension that bordered on outright contempt. Their eyes, though outwardly respectful, held a veiled impatience, a desire for her to simply vanish. They saw her as an obstacle, a relic that needed to be moved aside so they could fully seize control of her empire and, more importantly, her vast, carefully managed fortune. They were so blinded by their avarice, so consumed by their own sense of entitlement, that they failed utterly to grasp the true depth of her intellect, the sharpness of her mind, or the cunning that lay patiently beneath her seemingly gentle exterior. They truly believed she was losing her faculties, a convenient, self-serving narrative for their impending takeover. It was this profound disillusionment, this bitter taste of betrayal by those she had once hoped would carry her cherished legacy forward, that sparked the genesis of her audacious plan. Sylvia realized, with a chilling clarity, that the only way to truly gauge the character of those around her, to separate the gold from the dross, to discern the truly loyal from the utterly corrupt, was to strip herself of her power, her wealth, and her very identity. She needed to become nothing, a nobody, a burden, to see who would stoop to kick her when she was down, and who, conversely, would offer a genuine hand. It was a test of the human spirit, a desperate gamble for the soul of her life's work. The idea of the eviction was a stroke of genius, a theatrical masterstroke designed to expose the true colors of her family and the broader circle of her associates. Years ago, Sylvia had quietly purchased a small, unassuming apartment in an older, working-class district. It was a property she had forgotten about, a relic from a brief, experimental foray into real estate, a quiet investment from decades past. It was perfect. She had meticulously arranged for a staged foreclosure, a complex legal maneuver that would make it appear as though the bank, her own bank, the irony of which was almost unbearable in its exquisite pain, was reclaiming the property due to her inability to meet mortgage payments. The paperwork was flawless, meticulously crafted to withstand scrutiny, the public record painstakingly manipulated to paint a picture of an elderly woman who had fallen on hard times, utterly destitute and forgotten. She meticulously crafted her disguise, simple, worn clothing that obscured her true posture, a slight, almost imperceptible stoop that added years to her frame, a carefully practiced tremor in her hands that lent an air of fragility. She even adopted a new name, Eleanor Vance, a name as unassuming as her temporary persona. She would live in that apartment, observing, listening, and waiting. The plan was audacious, dangerous even, fraught with emotional peril, but Sylvia knew, deep in her bones, that it was the only way. She needed to discern who truly possessed the values of integrity, compassion, and loyalty, the very bedrock upon which she had built her empire, the principles she had fought so hard to uphold. Her fortune, her life's work, the legacy of Hawthorne Financial, would not, could not, fall into the hands of the unworthy. This was not just a test of character, it was a desperate, profound search for a soul worthy of inheritance, a search for hope in the face of profound betrayal. The dilapidated apartment building on Elm Street became Sylvia's temporary stage, her canvas for observation, a stark contrast to the gilded cages of her usual residences. The chipped paint on the facade, the worn, creaking stairs that echoed with every step, the faint, persistent smell of old cooking and stale cigarette smoke, it was a world away from the sanitized opulence of her former life. Here, Sylvia Hawthorne ceased to exist. In her place was Eleanor Vance, a seemingly frail, forgotten woman with a quiet demeanor, her face etched with the lines of a lifetime, her eyes carefully dulled to hide their true brilliance. She spent her days observing the subtle rhythms of the neighborhood, the small kindnesses exchanged between strangers, the casual cruelties born of desperation or indifference, all painting the rich, complex tapestry of ordinary life. Her former life, her vast empire, felt like a distant dream, a grand delusion from which she had, perhaps, finally awakened. She learned to appreciate the simple things, the warmth of a weak tea, the distant sound of children playing in the park, the resilience of the human spirit in the face of hardship. The first act of her elaborate play was the eviction itself, a spectacle orchestrated with meticulous precision by Lysander and Coraline, who reveled in the perceived humiliation of their estranged benefactor. The day arrived under a sky as gray and unforgiving as their hearts, a fitting backdrop for the unfolding indignity. A Hawthorne financial van, emblazoned with the company's prestigious, gleaming logo, pulled up to the curb, a jarring sight in the humble neighborhood, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Two burly men, hired by Lysander for their brute efficiency rather than their sensitivity, began to summarily remove Eleanor's meager belongings, a worn armchair, a stack of old, beloved books, a few boxes of what appeared to be sentimental knickknacks, and place them unceremoniously on the cracked sidewalk. Each item was handled with a careless disregard that spoke volumes of their contempt. Lysander Thorne himself arrived, not to offer assistance or a shred of human decency, but to supervise the indignity, ensuring the public spectacle was sufficiently humiliating. He stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, a sneer plastered across his handsome face, a picture of smug satisfaction. "Honestly, Coraline, I can't believe the state of this place," he remarked, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet street, loud enough for Eleanor and a few curious neighbors to hear every damning word. "And to think, this woman was once considered, well, someone. Clearly, her faculties have been in decline for years. It's a mercy, really, getting her out of here, for her own good." The words were designed to wound, to diminish. Coraline Vesper, ever the public relations expert, stood beside him, her cell phone seemingly glued to her ear, though Sylvia, acutely observant, suspected she was merely feigning a call, staging her own performance. "Darling, it's truly a testament to her independence, wouldn't you say?" Coraline purred, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, a saccharine sweetness that made Sylvia's stomach churn. Though one does wonder what she was doing in a place like this. So unrefined. The optics are just dreadful. She cast a disdainful glance at Eleanor, who sat on a small, wobbly stool, her gaze fixed on the ground, embodying the very picture of defeat and quiet suffering. Coraline then turned her back slightly, subtly taking a selfie with the eviction scene blurred in the background, no doubt already composing a caption about the challenges of elder care or some equally disingenuous sentiment, designed to garner sympathy for herself and Lysander, portraying them as compassionate benefactors. The raw, unvarnished cruelty of their performance was breathtaking in its audacity. They weren't just observing a situation, they were performing a calculated drama, for their own gratification and for the imagined audience of their shallow peers. Later that week, Sylvia, still in her guise as Eleanor Vance, paid a clandestine visit to the Hawthorne financial headquarters. Not through the glittering main entrance, of course, which she had designed herself, but through the discreet service entrance, posing as an elderly relative of a cleaning staff member. From the shadows, she observed Lysander in a high-powered meeting, dismissively waving away the legitimate concerns of a long-standing client, a sweet, elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson who had entrusted her life savings to the bank for decades. Lysander was prioritizing a risky, high-commission deal that would benefit him directly, but potentially jeopardize Mrs. Henderson's future. "Look, Mrs. Henderson," Lysander had stated, his voice devoid of empathy, his tone impatient, "if you're not willing to take a little risk, you won't see any significant returns. We're not a charity, after all." Sylvia's heart ached with a profound sense of betrayal. His words were a direct repudiation of the trust Sylvia had spent decades building, a blatant disregard for the very people the bank was meant to serve. Coraline, meanwhile, was seen in the opulent lobby, loudly discussing her upcoming charity gala, a grand, ostentatious affair designed more for social climbing and self-promotion than genuine philanthropy. "Oh, it's for a wonderful cause, darling," Sylvia overheard her telling a simpering colleague, her voice laced with cynicism, "but let's be honest, it's all about who you see and who sees you, isn't it?" Their avarice was a gaping maw, consuming everything in its path, their ethics replaced by a hollow pursuit of profit and prestige. But the world, Sylvia knew with a deep, abiding certainty, was not solely populated by such venal, self-serving creatures. Even in the depths of her orchestrated despair, glimmers of true humanity shone through, illuminating the pervasive shadows cast by her family's insatiable greed. These small acts of kindness were the true treasure she sought. The first beacon of light came in the form of Elias Eli Vance, a senior security guard at Hawthorne Financial. Eli was a man in his early 60s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a quiet dignity that belied his unassuming uniform. He had been assigned by Lysander to oversee the eviction, a task he clearly detested, his discomfort evident in his hunched shoulders and downcast gaze. As the movers carelessly tossed Eleanor's possessions onto the sidewalk, Eli had knelt beside her, his voice low and compassionate, a stark contrast to Lysander's cruel pronouncements. "Mrs. Vance," he had said, his voice laced with genuine concern, a tremor of empathy, "I'm truly sorry about all this. It's a terrible situation. No one deserves this." He didn't just stand by as a passive observer. He actively helped. With gentle, surprisingly delicate hands, Eli carefully packed the books, ensuring they weren't damaged, something the paid movers clearly couldn't care less about. He saw the value in the worn spines, recognizing they held more than just paper. He even offered to help her look for a temporary shelter, pulling out his own worn, cracked cell phone and scrolling through contacts with a furrowed brow. "My sister runs a small community outreach program," he explained, a slight tremor in his voice, "might be able to help you find a place for a night or two, at least. Nobody should be left out in the cold. Especially not someone like you, ma'am." He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything, yet his empathy flowed freely, unbidden. Sylvia noticed his worn uniform, the slight fatigue in his eyes. He was clearly a man who had faced his own struggles, who understood hardship, yet his compassion remained intact, a deep wellspring of goodness. He even offered to stay late, long after his shift ended and the movers had departed, just to ensure her few belongings were not stolen from the sidewalk. "It's the least I can do," he'd mumbled, his gaze sincere. "No one deserves to be treated this way. It just isn't right." Then there was Agnes Finch, Eleanor's neighbor from across the hall. Agnes was in her 70s, a retired schoolteacher with a gentle smile that reached her eyes that held the quiet wisdom of 1,000 stories and a lifetime of nurturing young minds. She had witnessed the eviction with a sorrowful expression, her brow furrowed in deep concern, wringing her hands with quiet distress. As soon as Lysander and Coraline had driven away in their luxury sedan, their mission of cruelty accomplished, Agnes had bustled over, her arms laden with a thermos and a warm, woolen shawl, as if she had been waiting for the vultures to depart. "Eleanor, dear," Agnes had cooed, her voice soft as a lullaby, infused with genuine concern, "come inside. You must be freezing out here. I've made a pot of my famous lentil soup, and there's plenty for two. Please, come in." She didn't question, didn't judge, didn't ask for explanations or demand to know the circumstances. She simply offered comfort, warmth, and a moment of respite from the harsh reality, an oasis of kindness in a desolate moment. She led Sylvia gently into her small, cluttered apartment, which, though modest in its furnishings, radiated a comforting warmth, a sense of home. The aroma of herbs and simmering vegetables filled the air, a scent of security and care. Agnes had placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of Sylvia, along with a cup of fragrant herbal tea, its steam curling invitingly. "It's not much, dear," she said, her eyes twinkling with a gentle humor, "but it's warm. And sometimes, that's all you need, isn't it?" She sat beside Sylvia, chatting about her day, about the antics of the neighborhood cats, about the joy of teaching children, her voice a soothing balm. She spoke of her own modest pension, how she stretched every penny to make ends meet, yet her generosity knew no bounds. She even offered Sylvia her spare room for as long as she needed it, a selfless act born of pure, unadulterated human kindness. "We're neighbors, dear. That's what neighbors do. We look out for each other. Always." Sylvia, hidden within her disguise, felt a pang in her heart, a warmth spreading through her chest that had been absent for too long. Here were two individuals, both of modest means, both facing their own quiet battles and daily struggles, yet their capacity for kindness was boundless, seemingly inexhaustible. They offered help without expectation of reward, compassion without judgment, dignity without question. They saw a fellow human being in distress and responded with an inherent goodness that transcended social status or personal gain, a pure, uncalculating empathy. Lysander and Coraline, swimming in wealth and privilege, had seen only an inconvenience, an opportunity for further self-aggrandizement, a means to an end. Eli and Agnes, with little to spare, had offered their precious time, their comfort, and their dignity. The contrast was stark, illuminating in its clarity. As Sylvia sat in Agnes's humble kitchen, sipping the warm, nourishing soup, a profound certainty solidified within her. Her decision, long mulled over in the quiet contemplation of her disguised life, was now absolute, unwavering. The true inheritors of her legacy, the true keepers of the values upon which Hawthorne Financial was built, were not those who shared her blood, but those who shared her heart. The test was complete. The results were in. And the stage was now set for the final, devastating act, a reckoning that would redefine the very meaning of justice. The annual Hawthorne Financial shareholders meeting was always a grand affair, a meticulously choreographed display of corporate power and prestige. This year, however, a palpable buzz of heightened anticipation permeated the glittering air. Rumors had swirled for weeks that Lysander Thorne, with Coraline Vesper by his side, would formally announce his ascension to CEO, cementing his absolute control over Sylvia Hawthorne's empire, a triumph he had meticulously engineered. The grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel glittered under the magnificent chandeliers, their crystals sparkling like captured stars, a testament to the immense wealth and influence gathered within its hallowed walls. The air was thick with expectation, a faint scent of expensive perfumes and polished ambition. Lysander stood at the podium, a triumphant smile playing on his lips, a carefully rehearsed confidence in his posture. The power he so craved, the ultimate dominion over his grandaunt's legacy, was almost within his grasp, palpable in the tension of his shoulders. Coraline, radiant in a shimmering designer gown that cost more than most people's annual salaries, sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on him with an almost proprietary air, her own triumph reflected in his impending ascent. Lysander began his address, his voice resonating with manufactured authority, speaking of modernizing the firm, of bold new directions, and of shedding the antiquated notions of the past, his words dripping with veiled contempt for Sylvia's traditional values. He subtly hinted at the necessary restructuring that had taken place, a veiled, almost dismissive reference to Sylvia's effective sidelining and public humiliation. He was just about to announce his new vision, his voice swelling with self-importance, a crescendo of his own ego, when a hush fell over the room, a collective, startled intake of breath that seemed to freeze the very air. The grand double doors at the rear of the ballroom, usually closed and guarded during such addresses, swung open with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness, as if controlled by an unseen hand. All eyes, drawn by an irresistible force, turned in unison. Standing framed in the doorway, bathed in the soft, ambient light filtering from the chandeliers, was not the frail, stooped figure of Eleanor Vance they had been told about. It was Sylvia Hawthorne, a vision of formidable power and elegance, resurrected and resplendent. She wore a deep sapphire blue suit, cut with razor-sharp precision, that seemed to shimmer with an inner authority, a silent declaration of her unyielding will. Her silver hair, no longer disheveled or disguised, was swept back in a sophisticated chignon, revealing a face unmarred by the feigned fragility she had adopted. Her eyes, those same eyes that had watched the world from behind a veil of perceived senility, now blazed with an intelligent fire that seemed to pierce through the very souls of those who dared to meet her gaze, sharp and knowing. Beside her, a tall, impeccably dressed man, his posture radiating quiet competence, carried a large, embossed leather briefcase with a certain reverence. This was Percival Sterling, Sylvia's personal attorney, a man known throughout the legal world for his absolute discretion, his razor-sharp legal mind, and his unwavering, almost legendary, loyalty. The silence in the room was absolute, so profound it was almost deafening, broken only by the faint, rhythmic click of Sylvia's elegant heels on the polished marble floor as she began her slow, deliberate walk down the central aisle. Each step was a measured declaration of intent, a drumbeat of impending reckoning that reverberated through the stunned assembly. Lysander's face, moments ago flushed with anticipated triumph, drained of all color, turning a sickly pale. Coraline, who had just been adjusting her pearl necklace with an air of smug satisfaction, froze, her jaw dropping almost imperceptibly, a small, involuntary sound escaping her lips. Their carefully constructed narrative, their elaborate charade, their meticulously planned coup, was crumbling before their very eyes, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. They looked as though they had seen a ghost, or perhaps, a very angry deity who had returned to exact a terrible retribution. The blood drained from Lysander's face, leaving it a mask of bewildered horror. Sylvia reached the front of the room, stopping directly in front of the podium, effectively eclipsing Lysander, casting him into her formidable shadow. Her gaze, cold and unwavering, fixed on her grandnephew, boring into his soul. "Lysander," she said, her voice clear and resonant, carrying to every corner of the room, a voice utterly devoid of the tremor she had so painstakingly cultivated as Eleanor Vance. "You seem surprised. Did you truly believe I was gone? That I was so easily dismissed, so conveniently forgotten?" Lysander stammered, attempting desperately to regain his composure, his voice a shaky whisper. Aunt Sylvia. What a pleasant surprise. We thought you were recuperating. We were so worried." His words were hollow, ringing with transparent falsehood, utterly unconvincing. Coraline, though silent, mirrored his panic, her eyes wide with dawning terror. Sylvia's lips curved into a chillingly ironic smile, a slight twist that held no warmth. "Recuperating? Oh, I was recuperating all right. Recuperating from the appalling realization that the very people I entrusted my legacy to were utterly devoid of integrity, compassion, or even a shred of common decency." Her voice grew colder, cutting through the stunned silence like a sharpened icicle. "You thought I was senile. You thought I was a burden, a doddering old woman in your way. You orchestrated my eviction from a property I deliberately allowed to appear foreclosed, just to see how low you would stoop, how far your greed would take you." A collective gasp rippled through the room, louder this time, a wave of shock washing over the shareholders as the full magnitude of her words began to sink in. Sylvia's eyes swept over the assembled shareholders, a silent accusation in her gaze, drawing them into the unfolding drama. "You, Lysander, and you, Coraline," she continued, her voice gaining power, resonating with a righteous fury that commanded attention, "you mocked an old woman on the street. You reveled in her perceived destitution, in her public humiliation. You spread malicious rumors of her mental decline, hoping to seize control of what you believed was rightfully yours, your undeserved inheritance." She turned her full attention back to the disgraced pair, her gaze piercing. "You paraded my supposed misfortune for your own selfish gain, for your own twisted amusement. You saw an opportunity to consolidate power, to line your already bulging pockets, without a second thought for the foundational values upon which Hawthorne Financial was built, the values of trust and service." She paused, allowing the crushing weight of her words to sink into the stunned silence of the room. Then, with a precise, almost imperious gesture towards Percival Sterling, he stepped forward, opening his large, embossed briefcase with a quiet click. "This property, the one you so gleefully evicted me from, Lysander," Sylvia announced, pulling out a crisp, official-looking deed, its seal gleaming, "is, in fact, the very first property Hawthorne Financial ever acquired. A humble, forgotten symbol of our humble beginnings, a tangible reminder of the core principles of prudence, hard work, and community upon which this institution was founded." And more importantly, she held up another document, a thick sheaf of complex legal papers, meticulously compiled and ironclad. "It was my final test. A test you both failed spectacularly, comprehensively, and irrevocably. Because you see," Sylvia concluded, her voice ringing with an undeniable finality, a tone that brooked no argument, while you schemed in your avarice to take my supposed inheritance, while you conspired to usurp my legacy, you neglected to realize that my inheritance was never just a sum of money, never just a fortune to be seized. My inheritance was the bank itself, its very soul. And I, Sylvia Hawthorne, remain its principal shareholder, with absolute control over its destiny, over its future, and over the fate of those who serve it. The game, as I believe I stated earlier, is indeed over. And your roles in it, Lysander and Coraline, are irrevocably finished, ended now and forever. The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with the shattered dreams of two avaricious individuals, their faces contorted in a horrifying tableau of fear and utter defeat. The aftermath of Sylvia Hawthorne's stunning revelation was nothing short of cataclysmic for Lysander Thorne and Coraline Vesper. The grand ballroom, moments ago a stage for their anticipated triumph, transformed in an instant into the theater of their spectacular, public downfall. Lysander, initially paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the shock, erupted in a flurry of disbelieving denials, his face contorted in a grotesque mask of betrayal, rage, and sheer, impotent fury. "This is preposterous, Aunt Sylvia. You can't do this. I am the COO. I have the support of the board," he shrieked, his voice cracking with desperation, a pathetic sound devoid of its former authority. Coraline, regaining some semblance of her composure, attempted to spin the narrative one last time, her voice shrill and desperate, clinging to her PR instincts even in ruin. "This is an emotional outburst. She's clearly unstable. A public spectacle. This is slander." But Sylvia was prepared for their every pathetic protest. She raised a hand, a gesture of absolute command, silencing their futile, flailing attempts to regain control. "Percival, if you would be so kind," she stated calmly, her voice chillingly devoid of emotion. Her attorney stepped forward, a stack of meticulously prepared, legally binding documents in his hand, a tangible symbol of their ruin. "Effective immediately," Sylvia announced, her voice resonating with unyielding authority that echoed through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "Lysander Thorne is stripped of all executive titles and responsibilities at Hawthorne Financial. His employment, and that of Coraline Vesper, is terminated for gross misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempts to undermine the integrity of this institution, as documented extensively by my legal team." The room buzzed with shocked whispers, a wave of stunned murmurs rippling through the shareholders. Lysander, consumed by a desperate rage, lunged forward, but Percival Sterling's security detail, discreetly positioned throughout the room and unseen until now, moved with quiet efficiency to block him, their presence a silent, undeniable force. Furthermore, Sylvia continued, her gaze unwavering as she fixed it on her grandnephew, her voice gaining a steely edge, "My personal legal team has compiled an extensive dossier outlining your various financial improprieties, your blatant insider trading activities, your manipulation of market data, and, of course, the rather blatant misappropriation of company funds for your extravagant personal expenses, a complete disregard for corporate governance. Expect formal charges to be filed shortly, by the end of the day, with full cooperation from the relevant authorities." Lysander's face went utterly ashen, his body slumping as if all bones had suddenly dissolved. Coraline, seeing the writing on the wall, the undeniable collapse of their carefully constructed world, slumped into her chair, her shimmering designer gown suddenly looking like a cheap, ill-fitting shroud. Their downfall was swift and brutally absolute. Within hours, news of their disgrace was plastered across every major financial news outlet, a sensational headline that shocked the corporate world. Their carefully cultivated public image shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Lysander's vast assets were frozen pending investigation, his lavish properties seized by the authorities. Coraline, once the darling of the social circuit, found herself uninvited from galas, her calls unanswered, her carefully constructed reputation in tatters, a pariah in the world she once dominated. They lost everything, their lucrative jobs, their lofty social standing, their ill-gotten wealth, and perhaps most painfully, their imagined future of limitless opulence and unchecked power. They, who had mocked a woman for being evicted and cast out, were now metaphorically, and very nearly literally, cast out onto the street, stripped bare of all their pretensions. The irony was so exquisite it almost brought a tear to the unseen narrator's eye. But Sylvia Hawthorne's justice was not merely punitive. It was also profoundly restorative, a testament to her unwavering belief in the power of genuine human connection. Later that week, in a far more intimate setting at her private estate, a sprawling property nestled amidst serene gardens, Sylvia extended personal invitations to two individuals who had shown her true humanity during her time in disguise. Elias Eli Vance, the humble security guard, arrived, looking bewildered and slightly overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of his surroundings. He thought he was there for an exit interview, perhaps a reprimand for helping a foreclosed tenant, fearing he had overstepped his bounds. Agnes Finch, the kind retired teacher, arrived shortly after, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation, a quiet wonder at the grandeur. She believed she was meeting the head of the bank to discuss a small community grant she had applied for, her modest hope for her neighborhood. Sylvia, now fully in her powerful persona, greeted them warmly, a genuine, gentle smile gracing her lips, a smile they had never seen when she was Eleanor. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Finch," she began, her voice soft but clear, carrying the weight of profound gratitude, "thank you for coming. You may be wondering why I've invited you here, to my home." Eli, still slightly flustered and unsure of himself amidst the grandeur, stammered, "Ma'am, I hope I didn't overstep during the incident with Eleanor. I just felt it was the right thing to do, I couldn't stand by." Agnes nodded, her eyes soft with compassion. "Eleanor was a dear, sweet woman. I just wanted to help her, to offer a little comfort. It seemed the natural thing to do." Sylvia's smile widened, a warmth radiating from her. "Indeed, she was. And it was precisely your actions, your unwavering kindness and compassion, your innate human decency, that truly stood out amidst a sea of indifference. You see," she paused, allowing a moment for the profound truth to sink in, "for the impossible to become real, Eleanor Vance, was me. I was testing the true character of those around me, peeling back the layers of pretense, and you, both of you, passed with flying colors, with a brilliance that outshone any wealth or power." The shock on their faces was priceless, a tableau of utter disbelief. Eli's jaw dropped, his eyes widening to saucers, a mixture of astonishment and dawning realization washing over him. Agnes gasped, clutching her chest, a soft sob escaping her lips, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming understanding washing over her features. Tears welled in their eyes. "Mr. Vance," Sylvia continued, turning to Eli, her voice filled with a quiet reverence, "you showed unparalleled empathy and integrity when others chose cruelty and self-interest. You went above and beyond your duty, out of pure human decency, risking your own position to help a stranger. For that, I am promoting you to head of corporate security, with a substantial salary increase, a full benefits package that includes comprehensive health care, and I am personally ensuring your retirement is secure beyond your wildest dreams. And," she added, a mischievous twinkle in her eye, "the small apartment where I resided as Eleanor, the one you so gallantly helped me evict from, is now fully yours, free and clear, along with a trust fund to ensure its upkeep and any renovations you desire." Eli was speechless, tears streaming down his face. He tried to protest, to say he didn't deserve such generosity, but Sylvia simply placed a gentle, reassuring hand on his arm. "It is not a gift, Mr. Vance. It is a deserved reward for your character, for your unwavering goodness. It is a testament to what truly matters." Then, Sylvia turned to Agnes, her gaze warm and appreciative. "Mrs. Finch, your boundless compassion and selfless generosity touched my heart deeply, perhaps more than you can know. You offered a stranger warmth, comfort, and friendship when she needed it most, without question or expectation. For your unwavering spirit, your pure heart, I am establishing the Agnes Finch Benevolent Fund, an endowment of $10 million dedicated to supporting retired teachers and vital community outreach programs in your neighborhood, ensuring your legacy of kindness continues to bloom. And as for your own comfort, I have arranged for a substantial annuity that will ensure you live in comfort and dignity for the rest of your days, free from any financial worry, free to pursue your passions." Agnes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the generosity, could only manage a choked sob, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling. "But, why," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I just did what anyone would do. It was nothing special." Sylvia smiled, a profound wisdom in her eyes. "No, Mrs. Finch. You did what few would do. And true character, unlike fleeting wealth or transient power, is beyond price. It is the most valuable currency in the world." The reward, for both of them, was not merely financial, it was a profound affirmation of their inherent goodness, a testament to the belief that genuine kindness always finds its way back, often in the most unexpected and overwhelming ways, far richer than any material gain. Months later, the dust had settled over Hawthorne Financial, revealing a landscape vastly different from the one Lysander and Coraline had envisioned in their greedy dreams. Under Sylvia's renewed, active leadership, the bank underwent a profound transformation. The focus shifted back to client trust, ethical investments, and a culture of integrity that permeated every level of the organization. New, morally upright executives were brought in, their appointments based solely on merit and unwavering character, not on familial ties or cunning ambition. The firm, once teetering on the brink of moral decay, its reputation tarnished by the greed of a few, began to flourish once more, its standing restored and even enhanced, precisely because it had purged the rot within, becoming a beacon of ethical finance. Sylvia Hawthorne, though still the ultimate authority and the driving force behind the bank's resurgence, found a profound peace in her decision, a quiet satisfaction that transcended her immense wealth. She had successfully steered her legacy away from the clutches of avarice and into the hands of those who genuinely valued humanity, who understood that true success was measured in trust and service, not just profit. She still worked diligently, her mind as sharp as ever, but now with a lightness in her heart, knowing that the institution she had painstakingly built would endure, not just as a financial powerhouse, but as a beacon of ethical conduct and compassionate capitalism. Elias Vance, now head of corporate security, walked the halls of Hawthorne Financial with a new spring in his step, his eyes no longer tired but alight with purpose. He managed his team with the same quiet dignity and profound compassion he had shown Sylvia when she was Eleanor, ensuring that the bank's security was not just about protecting assets, but about safeguarding its people and its core principles. He was a visible testament to Sylvia's new philosophy, a living embodiment of the notion that loyalty and kindness were virtues far more valuable than any financial degree or corporate title. The apartment Sylvia had given him was a quiet haven, a daily reminder of the unexpected grace that had entered his life, a home filled with peace. Agnes Finch, free from the worries of her modest pension, continued to live in her cherished apartment, but her generosity had now expanded tenfold, amplified by the resources at her disposal. The Agnes Finch Benevolent Fund provided much-needed support to retired teachers, ensuring their golden years were lived with comfort and dignity, their contributions to society honored. She organized community events, her small apartment becoming a hub of warmth and kindness for the entire neighborhood, a testament to her boundless spirit. Her life, though changed by wealth, remained rooted in the same selfless compassion that had always defined her. She found joy not in spending, but in giving, demonstrating that true wealth was measured not in what one accumulated, but in the positive impact one had on the lives of others. The story of Sylvia Hawthorne, the elderly woman who was evicted only to reveal herself as the owner of the very bank that orchestrated her downfall, became a quiet legend, whispered with reverence and awe throughout the city and beyond. It was a powerful reminder that the true measure of a person is not found in their titles, their bank accounts, or their outward appearances, but in the unseen depths of their character, in the choices they make when no one is watching. For it is often in the darkest moments, when all masks are stripped away, when desperation calls, that the true nature of the human heart is revealed, shining brightest against the backdrop of betrayal. And as the timeless wisdom goes, kindness, like a seed planted in fertile ground, will always, in due course, yield a harvest far richer than any material gain, proving that integrity and compassion are treasures beyond compare, eternal and invaluable. If this story of betrayal, disguise, and ultimate justice resonated with you, then you'll love the other incredible true stories we share on this channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What surprised you most about Sylvia's ingenious plan? Do you think Lysander and Coraline truly got what they deserved in the end? Let us know in the comments below.